What's going on, everybody? Rob Ferretti here, and I have got the story of stories. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because I'm going to tell you how I ended up representing myself in a federal discrimination lawsuit against my town, which is one of two current lawsuits and about to be one of three lawsuits going on at the same time. Now, if that doesn't hook you in because you're looking at me and reserve your judgment, whether you like me or not, I'm a straight, white, non-religious person. So I'm not really, I don't feel like I don't fall into a protected class as far as discrimination goes. And then to add the fact that the discrimination is based off of land use, which is my town denying me for building a garage and a house on my property effectively. This has been going on for over 7 years, the entire process, and has cost me, forget about building the house, over $500,000 between legal and professional fees so far. So I said, you know what? If this is going to take up so much of my time, I'm going to do what I've always done. And how have I been able to operate businesses and live the lifestyle that I live while still making and sharing this stuff with you guys? And the answer is because I sort of take whatever my life is and put it on camera so I can keep a relatively consistent upload schedule, keep you guys privy to what goes on in my life, show you why I'm not focused on rental cars all day long, or I'm not focused on luggage all day long, or I'm not doing my travel company all day long. It's all stuff that pulls my attention, but this has been the biggest, I want to say, time void of anything that I've worked on in my life, because I'm putting probably close to 1,000 hours a year into this litigation, which is now 3 years deep for the first federal litigation. The second litigation, which is a superior court litigation, which is going to have a much shorter time window, is for a recent denial that I had on my third application. We'll get into all of this. And then the third litigation, which is about to transpire, is the same, effectively the same as the first federal litigation, but with new claims arising from the further discrimination from denying my third application. All right, that's the overview. Let's get into it. I'll tell you where it started, how we got to this point, and this is going to be a much longer series. There is a lot to unpack here. I am looking to not only resolve my issue here, but I'm also looking to ultimately make my town better and more desirable. And I will explain as we go through this how that is going to happen, or I propose that is going to happen. So where I live is a small town in northeast New Jersey. It borders Alpine, Norwood, and Northvale. The town is called Rockley, New Jersey. There are like 72 residential properties in the entire town. It's 1 square mile in size, which, when you think about it, is not very big, 1 square mile. I bought this property in 2017. My house that I bought was built in 1921. So now it's over 100 years old, this property. My goal was to take an existing house and an existing detached garage, make them bigger. Something a lot more along the lines with modern day standards. Now that's sort of the start of where this is all starting. We have in my town, or in my borough, the single most restrictive lot coverage ordinance in, as far as I know, in New Jersey, but even potentially in America. And this is why I like making videos like this, because there's going to be stuff that you guys will be like, oh, well, my town has a 1% ordinance, or there'll be somebody that knows something that I can use to potentially my benefit, or like, hey, I was involved in the same thing and the judge ruled this, or I'm familiar with this case law. Why don't you take a look at this? And this is sort of why I make the videos, because yes, I'm up against attorneys. No, I'm not an attorney, but case law is great. I have, and I'm familiar with my audience. You guys know everything. Like, and when I say you know everything, there are so many experts in so many things: engineers, architects, attorneys, paralegals. There are people that are just like, oh, you know, I'm curious, let me dig in there and see what. You may see something, even from me explaining something, you may see something that I miss. You may see something or have a suggestion like, hey, you know what? I was in that similar situation and I wasted my time and effort and I just want to save you. Here's what happened. Like, you are locked into that interpretation. These things are all helpful to know. Good, bad, ugly. I like getting the feedback. And if you have anything you want to share with me, just shoot me an email, rob@superspeeders.com. At the end of the day, my town has a 5% lot coverage ordinance. That means you can cover up to 5% of your property with structure. Now, structure, it's got its own definition. It's so house, anything, it's not impervious surface, which is like, used to be mulch, but we have certain allowances. We'll get into all this in subsequent videos, but at the end of the day, we're at a 5% lot coverage, which gives the planning board far too much discretion and power to prevent people and gatekeep who gets to build what based on whether they like you, whether they don't like you, whether who you are, and not necessarily based on sound zoning and variance approvals, which is, to my knowledge, the smallest, and I will even question whether or not it's constitutionally legal to have such a restrictive coverage. The other key thing is we have a 2-acre minimum. Now, the 2-acre minimum it's a minimum lot size. I do not have 2 acres. I have just under an acre. I am not the only person in town that has just under an acre, but there's properties that are 1/4 of an acre, half an acre. Now, if you think about that, you've got an ordinance that allows for 5% coverage on an acre, which is 43,560 square feet. And you've got that footprint, and you take half of that, 1/4 of that, 1/4 of an acre, you can only build like a 400 square foot house, which clearly isn't up to modern day living standards. But then we also have an ordinance that requires a minimum of 1,000 square feet. So the ordinance itself isn't even viable. Like, usually what a town would do is if they have a 2-acre minimum, a 5-acre minimum, and certain lot coverage allowances for that, they would then, as the numbers go down and you have smaller properties that are not being subdivided but exist, they would be granted larger lot coverage percentages. My town doesn't do that. They just apply one fixed 5% across the board. You're allowed 4.5% for your main structure, 5% total coverage. That's where we have a problem. Probably 17 to 20 of the properties that are in the borough are undersized lots, which means they are underneath 2 acres, which is the minimum lot size required by ordinance. They exist. They've all been granted what is called a variance. So now the way zoning works is you have ordinances that say this is what's allowed. Anything that's not allowed, you'd have to apply for a variance. There are different types of variances. I'll get into in other videos what regulates the drafting of the variances, what laws, statutes, definitions all come into play. Not in this video, but at the end of the day, when you want variance relief, there's either 3 variances you can get. D variance, which is very difficult. That is a use variance. That is saying, I have a residential house. I want to turn it into a 7-Eleven. That's a use variance. Very difficult. You need the entirety of the board to vote. 100% has to agree with that. The other ones are C variances. A C1 variance under the municipal land use law is a hardship variance. That is, my property is a triangle. So it's impossible for me to build anything on my property without violating, or like I have wetlands on my property. None of these are true, by the way, but I have wetlands on my property, which restricts where I can develop a house. And for me to get the reasonable use of my property and to be able to construct anything, I need to get a hardship variance to put my house in the corner of the property. So like, I'm not going to make the setbacks. I'm not going to make this. I'm not going to make that. But that's a hardship. I can't control this. This is the only feasible use of my property. The other one is a C2 variance. That is a flexible variance. It's just needs to establish, and it's the easiest variance to get. You just have to establish that the benefits of what you're doing outweigh the detriments. And that's what most of the variances should be. A variance should not be the norm, by the way. The zoning is always supposed to allow for the reasonable use of both conforming and non-conforming properties. And that's where I think we're going to have the biggest change. Is I'm going to make a significant push to have this ordinance essentially invalidated. I'm going to challenge the constitutionality of it, that it's going to violate both the Fifth Amendment. So the Fifth Amendment, it would be under the regulatory taking. It's essentially the government deeming your property useless by regulating it to the point where you can't have reasonable use of your property. Because what I've been proposing, how do you determine what's reasonable? Well, the only way I can determine what's reasonable if we have an unreasonable ordinance is what everybody else has been granted, right? So if you've decided that a 5,000 square foot house on 1/8 of an acre is reasonable, I should be able to expect, at the very minimum, a 5,000 square foot house on 1 acre, right? That ordinance has been violated by, or been granted variance relief to almost, I'm just going to make the number up here, probably 80% of the people that have come through here on conforming properties, on even the largest property in my town, the privately owned, is like 18 acres, and they got approved for 11%. I come in and keep getting denied for like 11%. That's where this is all going to come into play, because what I am suing for is unequal treatment. So I was treated differently than everybody else. Everybody else was given approvals. Every other property my size or smaller in this town has been granted greater lot coverage relief than I've been denied for, or has greater relief than I've been denied for. And I'll go through the methodology. These are all facts. There is no interpretation here that I'm using that, oh yeah, well, you forgot about this one. They either have more coverage than I've been denied for, or they've been granted more coverage, whether they erected it or not. There's no question. There's nothing left on the table. There are maybe 3 undeveloped lots left in my town. Everything else is built. And there are no undeveloped lots that are buildable that are my size or smaller. So this is all going to get pretty wild. The equal protection claim is what my federal lawsuit is. In 2017, I put in an application for the house and the garage. You go back and you see my YouTube videos. Essentially, the problem I ran into wasn't what I was proposing. It was that I was a YouTuber. And that will be evident throughout this series, especially when my neighbor came in, and we'll make a whole video on my neighbor. I've got one of the most unneighborly neighbors you could ever imagine. And we'll get all into all the stuff that he's done. Is he a bad person? I don't know. He's never really had a chance to get to know the guy or anything like that. However, he has not treated me very neighborly. And I'll go through all the stuff that's transpired from day one to where we are now. The first application I went through took forever, probably put it in August, and I got denied in like April of the following year. By ordinance, and I made this argument during the thing, I'm like, guys, like, I know you're giving me a problem with the size of the garage, but theoretically, I could call the garage a barn, right? We've got barns all over town. There's people with indoor swimming pools in their barns at their pool houses. Like, people use barns for whatever, and they could be up to 10% of the size of my lot. That means my 1,444 square foot garage that I'm proposing, if I called it a barn, I could make it 3 times as big and not need any approval. I could literally come in here with a 4,000 square foot barn, put it in my backyard, and you guys can't say no to it. They ultimately denied me for a 3-car garage and the house that I'm standing in right now. And I'm like, well, guys, you said, oh, you have a problem with the garage capacity. What can I do? I reverted it down to what you said the ordinance allows for, is a 3-car garage. I dropped it to a 3-car garage. And like a real 3-car garage, like the same size as my garage, just an extra bay. And the same size garage that's been approved on properties that are half my size. So they voted me down. And in the same meeting, they recommended to how it works is they recommend to the governing body. Planning board voted, the same meeting they voted me down, to require now 2 acres to be able to take advantage of the barn ordinance. I'm like, well, and that'll be a whole nother video, how the barn thing went down. And I'm like, well, if it's a minimum of 2 acres, that's sort of just targeting me. That's just preventing me from going in and coming back and making a barn. Municipal land use law requires the decision to be published in 45 days. Everybody in the last 25 years has gotten their resolutions within 45 days. This guy, while they're passing their barn ordinance, so I can't submit another application with a barn, 83 days. It's probably one of the most maddening things, and I'm telling you, it is so illogical, so inconsistent, and so frustrating that I don't even know where to start. Like, I was accused of not getting filming permits for walking around my yard and filming myself cutting down trees. And I'm like, well, that's weird. I'm like, what's the ordinance say? Well, anywhere in the borough, you need a filming permit. I'm like, okay. I'm like, does anyone else pull the filming permit? Well, yeah, Law and Order did 6 years ago. I'm like, well, that's not, like, what constitutes commercial filming? Well, you have ads on your video, which, by the way, this series is not going to have any ads on it because I don't even want to deal with that headache. But I'm like, well, what do you mean? YouTube defaults by putting ads on people's videos. So, like, what's the big deal? But anyway, if that's going to make it commercial, then why not, like, everybody that there's a wedding hall, the Rockley Wedding Hall, gorgeous, probably one of the best venues in New Jersey. They do probably 200 weddings a year, whatever, 150 weddings a year. Not one filming permit. Nobody's got a problem with that. Then we had Happy Gilmore too. They had, and that's why filming permits exist, they didn't pull a filming permit. They had buses, they had hundreds of cars, extras, trailers, trucks, no filming permits. I'm the only guy that's got to deal with this. So they passed the barn ordinance. I went in with a second application proposing a house, and then I was proposing a garage/barn. So because they've had people approved as garage/barn, so I could have 3 cars, and then the remainder of it would be a barn. I come in and their response was, looks the same. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? We're a historic town. I've passed a historic board on both times on this. I can't make it look different. I can't put up a modern structure. I can't change the position on the property. All I can do is try to accommodate your illogical treatment towards me. Well, it looks the same. We'd hate to see you waste your time. I'm like, geez, guys, I'm 2 years into this. I'm living in an apartment now, expecting to build a house on the property. So I was like, all right, well, revise it and come back and get rid of the garage altogether. We'll save that for another day. Came back in, put the application for the house. They still dragged me through the coals. And also, can you make it smaller? I'm like, I'm so much smaller than everybody else. I refused to make any further changes. They ultimately approved me. But when they did, they said, all right, we approve you as long as you agree to effectively never make a YouTube video on your property. I'm like, well, you guys have been blaming me for this YouTube stuff for a long time, but you've never given me a chance to give me a ticket so I can bring it to a judge and you can throw it out and you could take the YouTube thing and shove it up your board's patoot, right? Never did that. So they passed my second thing saying no commercial activity on the property whatsoever. I did what is called a prerogative writ lawsuit in the Superior Court. The judge said, look, you can't say that. You gotta go back and we'll give the board an opportunity to remand the language. And that condition is not good. So you gotta change the verbiage and you give it back to me. And if I think the verbiage is good, we can let it stand. Otherwise, you guys can elect to do whatever you want to do. They voted to pull it out altogether because they tried to revise that language so many times. So okay, you just can't YouTube from the property. No, that's excluded. And it's absolutely maddening. Third application now, I was now wanting to come back in and then do my garage because in between that, after the approval of the second application, I built my house. Now I have a house to live in, but I don't have a garage and I don't want to do my driveway because doing my driveway, the only access to the back to do the pool and the garage and everything like that would be to drive over the driveway with the machines. So third application goes in last year. They start playing their games and dragging me around, ultimately voting me down for my third application for a 1,296 square foot garage and pool. And I'm like, guys, it's 11.6%. The guardrail, so 11.8%, which is nonsensical coverage. They've been all over the place from you can't use any previous approvals every application stands on its own merit. That's what it all boils down to. And we're weighing your application based off your merits. And I'm like, all right, but you're saying that, but then the next thing they say is, if we approve you, you're going to set a precedent and we're going to have to give the same approval to everybody else. And I'm like, you just said every application stands on its own merits, and you're using the basis of denial that if you approve me, you're going to have to approve other people. But also everybody else who's got a property my size or smaller has already been approved for more than I'm getting denied for. So you can't even set a precedent if everybody else exists greater than what you're denying me for. So it was a very frustrating process. There's so much more complexity to it. I'm going to keep you guys in the loop. We'll break it down and be very methodical as to how this is going to go and what was approved, what was testified to, what was presented. They voted down my third application because I did not provide, according to them, the proofs necessary to approve the C2 variance relief. It's a requirement that everybody present the benefit, either the hardship or the proofs to support the variance relief. I went back to all of these different applications. I'm the only person that presented any proofs. And that's why these lawsuits exist, because these other people got approved for double the lot coverage, triple the lot coverage in no time, right? And then you're gonna be like, well, 11% is not a lot. Largest property in our town is 18 acres. They got approved for 11% in less than an hour. Here I am almost 15 planning board meetings into this, continually getting denied, and everybody else seemingly walks through without presenting any proofs, without doing any of the stuff that's required, without the testimony that mine isn't sufficient, but everybody else is going through without it and getting greater coverages. So we're going to break down, we're going to go through each of these other applications that they've approved. We're going to go through what exists in the town. We're going to go through the fact that my town is so sideways, they can't tell you what's supposed to be on half these properties. They can't tell you what exists on half these properties. It is such a mess of zoning and zoning enforcement, and the only thing that they rely on is the control that they have by having the most restrictive lot coverage ordinance in possibly the country, but definitely in New Jersey. It's going to get interesting as I break this all down and show you how egregious this is. It's been one of the most maddening things I've ever dealt with. There's one guy on the planning board who's also an attorney who he said, well, look, he's been against everything I've ever done, by the way. The ordinance says 5%. You're looking for more than double. I just can't in good conscience, it's more than double what the ordinance allows for. Meanwhile, a couple of years before my application, this guy got 5x. He's at 23%. So he's almost 5 times what the ordinance allows in less than 30 minutes with no planning testimony, with no proofs presented. And not only that, he's got half the size property as me. He's been approved for more coverage than they're denying me for on double the property. The hypocrisy is like unbelievable. There's the games that have been played in this town for allowing the people, because again, it's a small, rich town, allowing people to use to the center line of the road to make their lots bigger, to prevent them having to get variance relief. All these games that got played over the years, allowing illegal lot coverage to be used as existing to make it look like instead of a guy tripling his lot coverage, he's actually reducing it by 50%. And I'm like, well, he covered his yard in gravel. And then you're like, well, yeah, but he corrected that. So it's an illegal condition. You can't use an illegal condition for zoning. Zoning, you have to say, what was recent? What was the last approval that this property had? Was it before the ordinances were enacted? Whatever it is, you have to start with a starting point. And the starting point isn't, you can't give them an as-built or an as-existing for an illegal condition, especially if they created it. That's astonishing to me. But the games are endless. It's all going to point to one guy, or what I'm going to allege is one guy. This is my opinion, that it's the responsibility of the planning board's attorney to prevent stuff like this from happening. Our planning board attorney, who just happens to have been sitting on our planning board for the last 50 some odd years, has sat through it all. He's aware of everything. He's the one who knows what's going down and effectively allowing it to happen. And when you file a lawsuit, towns have insurance, right? Like anybody, you have an insurance policy in case you screw up. The insurance company they accept the claim, they provide an attorney. My town, they decided to assign the guy, the 50 years of sitting planning board attorney, as co-counsel, right? That's pretty sketch. Why would we spend the money when we have, unless you feel like the insurance company isn't presenting competent counsel? Well, the reason is because if you don't want somebody to find the body, you send the guy with the shovel over there to sort of do the dance and protect everything. You understand now why this is going to be like an 8-part series, because we're going to break it down by what's existing in the town, how I put together my application, how they treated my application, how they treated different definitions of barns, how they allowed other people to do stuff that they weren't supposed to do to get approvals that they weren't supposed to get, how the approvals don't reflect what was actually constructed. Which again, we're going to focus on what the town did, not what other people did. I have 0 issues. And I think I should probably start the video with this. I have 0 issues with what's been constructed in my town. It's a lovely town. The properties are lovely. The construction is lovely. But it's not reflective of what our ordinances are. And to have the strictest zoning ordinance when that's not reflective of what actually exists, what the planning board actually approved, it just harms our town because it gives too much power to a planning board to pick and choose and effectively gatekeep who they want in the town or what they want them to do, because they could make them go through all these things and say strict interpretation of the ordinance when it's impossible to adhere to. So if the ordinance doesn't belong, I'm going to get it repealed. I'm going to make the town more attractive once that ordinance is gone. And they actually, what I want them to do is to look at what actually exists. What's been approved, what exists, redo the approvals to show what exists, and then redo the zoning. What we have is great. That's the character of the town, and you should make your zoning ordinances reflect what exists as what we are doing to preserve the historic character of our town, the 2-acre minimum, and then the air, light, and open space that we're trying to preserve in this town. It's not really being impacted by 11% coverage, 12% coverage, 15% coverage. And especially when that's allowed on 2-acre conforming lots, that should definitely bleed over to the undersized lots to make them more attractive, because those are the people that are going to have less money that should be able to come in here and develop these small properties or the smaller properties instead of leaving dilapidated properties that are around for far too long without being turned over. Rob Ferretti, thank you for sitting through that. I can't wait to edit this. But that is the long, short version of what's about to be an 8-part series. If you want to be a part of this, if you want to see some of these records, if you're a professional engineer, architect, surveyor, anything like that, paralegal, anything where you want to say like, hey, let me take a crack at some of these documents. Maybe I'll see something you missed. Let me calculate the lot size for that. Let me know. Shoot me an email, rob@superspeeders.com. Thank you for watching. And this is going to get a while, but I'll try to get one video every week to 10 days up. So this will be going on for a couple of months, but it's going to take a long time to edit this all together. And enjoy the ride. It's going to be, it's going to make you, hopefully it makes you as frustrated and as PO'd as it has made me over the last couple of years. But I figured it was time to share it with you, because now my life becomes content yet again.